Bluegrass District United Methodist Men and Kentucky Conference United Methodist Men. We're going to continue tonight. I said we're going to read chapter every week in the No Man Left Behind series. We're going to start chapter 2. Tonight's little session is going to be a little short because chapter 2 is short. So, tonight we're going to be talking about no man fails on purpose. Yeah. So here we go. Before you can get the right answer, you have to ask the right question. What is the state of men in America today? What is the difference? What difference does it make? When we see and understand the ramifications of men who are failing, we'll understand that starting with men is a systemic solution to the problems of our churches and the world. Many, if not most, of our cultural problems, divorce, abortion, juvenile crime, fatherlessness, can be traced back to the failure of a man. Ironically, it is a man who got caught up in the morning hoping to succeed. Yeah, because life does happen. The signs are all around us. We live in a country where every third child has been born out of wedlock. There are 24 million kids don't live with their biological fathers, where half of all marriages end in divorce. We read these statistics and are just blown by them, or we consider what they mean for our country and for our churches. Wouldn't you agree there must be something systematically wrong with the culture that allows these things to happen? It's kind of sad, but there is some problems, and that's why with this book we are going to try to ramify that and try to hopefully build up our men's group, get them more involved, get them on the right track. Just talking about listening to God. We get them know the commandments. We get them listening to God. We get them trying to be on that path of the straight and narrow in the right way. And it takes time, and we can do this. Like we discussed last time. We don't want to fail. We're not going to fail on purpose, but we're going to keep trying till we succeed. It's always the key to success. Failure is the key to success. Let me get that straight. Fatherlessness is a rampant and well-documented problem in our society. Only a third of children in America will live in both of the biological parents through the age of 18. There's some statistics they show in this book that says 72 million children under 18 tonight. 33% of them will go to bed in a home without biological father. That's astronomical. 33% of 72 million going to bed at home without biological father. But I also had a strict mother and a strict aunt who kept my butt in church, who kept me on the straight and narrow. I met some good men, good Christian men that kept me straight and narrow, and I guess that's why I'm interested in helping even the teenage young males have a home, have that upbringing, have that fatherly, guidance. Even like this morning, I was watching Father Knows Best. I don't know if y'all watch it. I can never think of his name. That plays Father Knows Best. But anyway, there was a young boy that kept coming over to his house and was very interested in the father. And he kept pestering him because he was in the business. He has his own insurance business, and he wanted to be like him. He was more interested in having that father figure, someone to spend time with him. And that's kind of how I felt like when I came to Kentucky in '82. I didn't have a father. I hadn't saw my father since I was 5 years old, and even when I was living in Pennsylvania, I had aunts, brothers, and them. They were kind of like fathers, but they really. But coming to Kentucky, I met some great men, and I'm glad that these men had a father, and they just took to me. I didn't ask for it, God just led them to me, and I'm glad it happened. Marriages ending divorce affecting 1 million children each year. Divorce rates for the second and third marriages are higher. Yeah, it seems like, men are rushing to get married because instead of taking the time to date, they feel like they can't live without another woman, and God created woman to be our helper, our helpmate. Right, when they just get in a hurry and they go on and they don't think about being happy and doing the right things, but even by their spouse, and then the spouse is leaving for other reasons. 33% of children, again, half of all children in broken homes have not seen their father in over a year. Children who come from fatherless homes are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and have emotional problems and repeat a grade. And that is kind of true, because again, living in Pennsylvania, we were living below poverty and stuff, and but having these men in my life, Dilbert Singleton and Donnie Leonard, just having someone to look up to, and I guess that's why I kind of look towards a lot of pastors as my mentor, because again, in Proverbs chapter 2 today, this being the second day of March, if we read Proverbs every day, it gives us instruction for life. It will help you understand things. It's like, I had good men in my life, good positive influences. You even look up the pastors to keep me going, keep me straight. Even like Wallace Bolton, I kind of adopted him as my spiritual father, pastoral father, or whatever you want to call it, because I always looked up to Greg. There's many pastors I look up to because they have that warmth about them that, God's God, not being God, but being like God, being like Jesus, living like Jesus. And these men, just like Dilbert and Don, all spiritual men and godly, loving men, and I guess that's why I kind of try to be like them. Of deeper systematic issues, treating symptoms is necessary and good, but you can't cure a disease by treating physical and psychological studies. Problems, the root problem, the system problem, it is that we have not properly discipled our men, and the is with symptomatic solutions. In social services circles, the parable is told about a small village on the edge of a river, and one day, in the water, the villager quickly swam out. The next day, another villager walking beside the river saw 2 babies in the river. He quickly jumped in the river. The following day, 4 babies were rescued by villagers. Water increased. Villagers organized themselves quickly, building piers, tying rope lines, and training teams to rescue babies. They soon working day and night. Still, the number of children floating down the river increased each day. The villagers worked as hard as they could, but no one ever asked the question, why are these babies in the river? Let's go upstream and see where they are coming from. What is the upstream of cause of our cultural and spiritual ills? Consider a concrete story about a wife who had an affair and left her husband, or a child's behavior is so bad that it rips the family apart. But you only hear about these stories because they are relatively rare, and often, even if a wife does have years of emotional neglect, if not abuse, by a husband who was never taught what it takes to have a successful marriage. Consider teen pregnancy. Young men have been instilled with the proper values of their father. Young women are secure in love with their father and of God and won't look for acceptance in the arms of a young man. So, how to teach their teenagers about sex, chastity, and God's plan for them in marriage relationship. I really don't know about our church because I would assume so because most men in our church have got grandkids and they got grandkids. So I think there's a couple of them have 5 generations. Answer that question. How about crime? Men comprise 93% of prison population in America. Yeah, it is kind of sad. And of those, 85% report having no father figure in their lives. I'm glad I'm not part of that 85%. I'm glad I'm in that 15% that's done a lot better. How many their fathers had stuck? I'd say probably 50%, 60%, it might even be less than, who knows. No one is trying to beat up on men here. If anything, we're saying, look, how important men are. Look what happens when they aren't taught to do the right things. You'd think the church would be a safe haven for many of those disturbing statistics. Surely kids who grow up going to church will have a foundation of faith that carries into adulthood. If a couple goes to church together, you would think that their marriage would be much more likely to succeed. Unfortunately, neither of these assumptions are true, and it's not. In fact, men in church face the same challenges and frustrations. Every 10 men in church, 8 will not find their job satisfactory. 6 will pay the monthly minimum on their credit card bills. 5 will have a major. 4 will get divorced, affecting 1 million children each year. Still, that's a lot of children. Only 1 will have a biblical worldview. All 10 balance work and family. And that is true. I was listening to, I think it was Adrian Rogers. He was talking about being fair, firm, and having fun while raising a family. And he was talking about basically the same thing, how men and fathers and mothers, are trying to have more money, but they go to church, they do all this, but they work more than to spend time with each other, and they're not spending enough time with their kids, and that's true. Until I just started reading this, I didn't think about even what Adrian Rogers was saying on his podcast today. What has happened? If most of the major societal problems we face on can be traced back to the failure of men, why aren't men in church doing any better than men outside the church? And here we go. This is why we're trying to do this Igniter Kit, and why we're trying to do what God says to do. The answer is we are not discipling men to be followers of Jesus Christ. Our churches are not effectively helping men to understand what it takes to be a godly husband, a godly father, and a godly man. You're right. I believe it was in the discipleship that the conference held years ago. I believe that's where I read it, in the discipleship book. That we've been in the business of making Christians and not making disciples, and there's a big difference. Yeah, becoming a Christian, making Christians is, we get them in, we get them accepted Jesus Christ, and that's it, and we leave them alone. We don't do anything else to further them, and they stay in that infant stage all that time. But if we start becoming disciple makers and start discipling men, yeah, it will, because they're going to start growing. They're going to start going around little clock right there. Started infant, then moved to child, then teenager, then I think there was one other, and then into the adult, being the spiritual leader, being the disciple teacher, disciple maker, and then we start that chain again, bringing in more men, bringing in more. And that's going to be our goal here throughout the conference. And yeah, it's going to take a while. It's going to be a fight, but I know we can do it. There are an estimated 113 million men in America 15 years of age and older. Of these 69 million, 61% make no profession of faith in Jesus Christ whatsoever. Therefore, barely more than a third of men in America indicate they are followers of Christ. So is the church doing a good job with men who are present? Of the 44 million men who profess faith in Christ, only 6 million men are involved in any ongoing intentional discipleship program. That's 1 in 7 men who profess faith in Christ, and only 1 out of 18 men in America. I got a little chart in here, and I'm going to try to show it to you. You can see this chart that I'm going to be reading from. I don't know if you can see, it's probably all crooked. But anyway, in this chart it says approximate breakdown of American men by the level of spiritual development. Okay, number of men in the U.S., men who make no profession of faith, out of 69 million is 61%. Oh, number of men in the United States is 113 million, 100%. Men who make no profession of faith, 69 million, 61%. Men who profess faith in Christ, 44 million, is at 39%. Not involved in any discipleship process, 38 million, 33% of all men are not involved in any discipleship process. Involved in ongoing discipleship in some way, 6 million. Or a total of 6% of all men. 6% of all men. That's not a whole lot of men involved in any type of discipleship. Imagine taking 18 men to a baseball field, breaking them up into 2 teams, and giving them helmets, bats, balls, and gloves. Had ever seen a baseball game? What would happen? It'd be chaos. Men would be throwing balls at other men, chasing each other around the field. They would be asking questions like, why are there 3 rubber squares and 1 rubber pentagon? Or what's are these huge gloves? They just wouldn't get it. That's what's happening with our culture today. Only 1 out of 18 men is learning how to be godly men. So we suffer divorce, fatherless crimes, and other societal problems. Reducing these ills will not come from social reforms alone. They will come from spiritual reforms. What we need is nothing less than moral and spiritual reformation of society. Think about this for a moment. Is there any way we can get society right if we don't first get the church right? Is it true that there is any way we can get if we don't get the families right? If it is true, is there any way we can get the families right if we don't first get marriages right? And if that is true, is there any way we can get marriages right if we don't get men right? Well, how then do we get men right? Well, the answer is simple, according to this. By discipling them to be followers of Jesus Christ. A spiritual reformation of society starts with a spiritual reformation of men. Can this be done? More importantly, will it work? It has been done before. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, Jesus, who gathered Himself around the 12 regular men, and they together changed the world. Yeah, that's right. Jesus did do it. He got 12 men together, and they did it. Just 12 men changed the whole world. Imagine what we could do if we could get 12 men. Imagine what we could do if we could get one man from every district out of our 9 districts together, we could probably change the whole state of Kentucky. And as we start discipling in the districts, we can get more and more men. And you think we could start a chain reaction. We could revolutionize the product of the United Methodist men. We could on fire, coming together as one. Matthew 28 contains the single most effective speech ever delivered. More than millions of people and billions of dollars have been mobilized by this one speech than in any other human history. And we hear this all the time in the United Methodist Church. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, of the Holy Spirit or Ghost, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And I am surely with you always to the very end of the age. I would have thought this brief speech given to a ragtag group of men, most of whom probably never have been more than 45 miles or so from their homes, would have resulted in billions of people following Jesus Christ. Who were these guys? These were men just like the ones that you have in your church. And again, we got another diagram here, which I'm going to read, and we're going to start from bottom up, okay? First of all, we got to get men right. Once we get men right, we got to get marriages right. Well, actually, according to this, the air's going up, but then to get the society right, we got to get the church right. To get the church right, we got to get families right. To get families right, we got to get marriages right. And to get marriages right, we got to get what? Men right. It goes down here. In order to get your top goal, you got to get everything down below right. And that's what's going on here. Some small business owners, Peter, James, and John, were the first fishermen. A snob was Nathaniel, who said Nazareth can. The accountant, Judas Iscariot, kept track of the money. The religious guy was Simon the Zealot. A government employee was Matthew, the tax collector. And young guys, Andrew. Maybe all of them were in their early 20s or even younger. Now the big idea is a spiritual reformation of society starts with a spiritual boils down to men again, where this starts from. Jesus discipled these men, and they changed the world. If you disciple men of your church to follow Christ, what will happen? Marriages will improve, then families, then the church. The church is already lacking men. In the average church in America, there are 3 women for every 2 men. That's probably true, but I think in my church, I think it's more like 5 women to every man. I mean, it seems like there's more women in our church than there is men. And think about it. Why would God be doing such an inadequate job of discipling the ones we already have? Well, where the men he sees looks almost like. And we're not talking about looks, we're talking about the way they. And and this is true for every church you go to. You got those twice a day, and that's the last time you see them. They come in, and that's probably when the wives that come all the time. Probably that's the only time the wives get them to come, or that's probably the only time they can come, and so that's it. Why be discipled? If they aren't, they eventually will find something else to hold their attention, like Sunday morning going fishing, like John Walton did on the Waltons. He never fish, or he'd work around the house or just do whatever, while the rest of the boys and sisters and Olivia and Graham. But I know John stayed home a lot. John Lawton falls into one of these. It's a story that we hear too often. In fact, Pat has lived it. His father, when he was 2 years old, Bob and his three siblings were raised by a single mom. She did a great job. But my father never felt the scratch of his dad's whiskers, never smelt the work of his clothes, never heard him whistle while he worked, never heard him read a bedtime story, never saw his own dad wink at his mom, never heard him say, "I love you, son," or "I'm proud of you, son." Without a dad, he had to guess at what it meant to be a man, a husband, and a father to me. Sometimes I just wonder not having father around, on some of these questions. But I always left my faith to God, and I let God help me and guide me through. When he worked with his older brother, Harry, on a bread truck, and a paper up at 3 a.m. They had a permanent tardy slip to school. When a man fails, he does life. He usually takes down a good woman or two or three or four children with him. When my dad became indoctrinated with the sins of his fathers or break the cycle, he really wanted to break the cycle, Pat, because when he joined the church for help. Unfortunately, our church had a vision to put my dad to work, but no vision to help disciple him to churches. We get hung up in church. We can almost become like Nicodemus. We go to church, we do the same things all the time, and we just get in that rut where we don't think. We're like, "Oh, so we're glad to have you," and all this. We run our mouths and we act like the goody two shoes, but then we turn around and that's it. And so eventually these people come and they don't get fellowship. They don't get, especially, if they come in and they're poor and they need, they come and just get. People try to abuse the church and all that. Time to disciple them, get to know them, try to, have more programs. Not every church is going to have something that some. Eventually we could be like Drew did up at Carrollton. Different programs and end up with several hundred programs and end up with a great big men's group. We could do that, get the different interests going and do it from there. I just gotta figure one along. Okay. As a result, my dad became as successful as a worker. So at age 40, my dad was at the top was church. I was in 6th grade. My brothers were in 7th, 5th, and 3rd grade. He and my mother just got burned out and we left the church. And that happens a lot. I see that happening for pastors a whole lot too. They get burned out. They get worse because the congregation will not step up. The congregation will not do anything. They say, "Oh, we'll do that." I saw that when I was at Parable. We had one pastor, Jimmy Owens, who did a whole lot of stuff, and I think he eventually got burned out. We need to be lay driven. We, as United Methodist men, need to help our clergy out. We need to feed them just as much as we need to feed each other. And, spiritually, we need to make sure that we get our bad church. We need to make sure that we're not just doing everything. Of course, that's kind of like me. Sometimes I kind of do this, I'm going to do that. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I find myself getting stressed. I find myself getting burned at times. And then it's like, Edward, you got to stop this. You got to stop. They got to start taking up, and they got to start taking the lead. Because if you do it all, they're not going to want to do it. I hear it all the time, especially at work. You need to save this for tomorrow. You know, I always feel it needs. If it needs to be done, let's. The results have been traffic. Pat says that single decision put our family into the trail span. We have still not fully recovered. 2 high school dropouts, drug addiction, alcoholism, and brother died of a heroin overdose. It has been more than 3/4 of a century since my dad was abandoned by his father, and 40 years after our family dropped out of church. I can't help but wonder how our family would have been different if our church had offered a man's discipleship ministry. I will never know, but I hope the men in your church and their sons and daughters will. Obviously, Pat will never know, but the men in your church can. Your church can break the cycle. God's gospel. God brought the gospel into my family line. My wife led me to Christ. In turn, I was able to help to introduce Dad, Mom, and 2 brothers to Christ as love Christ. They both married Christian spouses. That did break the cycle, but it took 2 generations instead of 1. What was the difference between Pat and his father? Pat got involved in to live like Christ, a church behind. Pat's dad and mom died in 2002. If his dad were alive, Pat would say to him, Dad, you know I wanted to break that cycle. Dad, we have took 2 generations instead of 1, but God has done it. Yeah, God done it in his time according to his will. Pat knows that if Bob would say, I am responsible for taking us out of church. That's admirable. However, the church must also accept the culpability. As a church, they had a vision for putting Bob to work. They didn't have to become a disciple. And that's what we need. We need to make sure as a church, make sure that, you know, when to just accept him is into the do all this to grow them and not do nothing and to say, oh well, you know, we come, we think about ourselves, we're going, you know, I can see a lot of potential in our church as Junction City. I can see us growing. I can see if even the elderly, you know, they got so much wisdom they could pass on. We need younger people. We need stuff to track, and sometimes we just gonna have to step up to the plate and do here a little bit there and be a lay driven church, and so this way we each other's feet, you know. Methodist women and the Conference Methodist women are very active groups. The United Methodist men, of course, you know, like I said, we only get, well, we have 3 active districts, but I know since COVID, most of the other 2 districts I haven't heard much about. I'm still trying to but on the Bluegrass District, we're trying to get active again, and hopefully by the get back together, we can have a strong, united Methodist men's group. Pat's dad was a good man. He did not want to fail. If he could have seen what was coming around the bend, he would have made a different decision. He never saw it coming. Sometimes life happens. We just don't see things. The church, on the other hand, should have seen it coming. It's time to fix this system so that the future generation of men become disciples and don't get left behind. You probably have a man in your church that's just like Pat said, trying to be a good man, full of good intentions, full of hopes and dreams for his family, a man who wants to break the cycle for guidance. His sons and his daughters may be in your nursery or youth group. and they have no idea what is about to happen when Dad leaves the church. Please, for the sake of Christ and His kingdom, identify that man and husband and father. Pat can testify how important this is. His dad's church missed its moment. From that one era, his family has suffered needlessly for over 40 years. It doesn't have to happen to you men. You can build a system that God can use to disciple every man in your church. Wanting to do something is not the same as doing it. What kind of man are you trying to make? What kind of men are you trying to make? In the next chapter, we will help you define a disciple so that you can know what you are trying to produce. Go using our hands to be fruitful. And I say even use our mouth, our brain, and our heart. Many of today's cultural problems can ultimately be traced back to the failure of men. Again, no man wants to fail on purpose. Men in the church face the same problems and issues as men outside the church. We're no different no matter where we go. We can look back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. When God said, let's make man in our image, guess what He did? He made man in His image, so we are no different. And then when the fall of man, we still were no different. We still sin. We all have sins. We all have good intentions. We all are different no matter. We are not different no matter what. We all our bodies may look different, but our insides are the same. We are no different. Only 1 out of 18 men in America is actively involved in discipleship. I'm trying to be one of them. I'm trying to be involved in discipleship. See, Jesus poured His life and ministry into the 12 young men. On these men, He built the church. If you disciple men, marriages will improve, then families, and then church, and finally the world. Our church needs to have a vision for building disciples, not just putting people to work. Yeah, we get people into like, oh, well, we can have them on this committee, we can have them on that committee. That's what Junction did when I first came in. I ain't picking on Junction City. Because, every church is, church is different. Everybody thinks, oh, we get this person in, we can put them on this committee, that committee, and all this. What about their spiritual life? What are we doing for their spiritual life? What are we doing? Not just for the, just the men, because if we get the men going, we can get the women going. What are we doing for my life? What are you doing to help me grow spiritually? What am I doing to help you? What are we doing with our hands to disciple? And what are we doing with our hands to help other people? A few questions. Are we giving men a bum rap when we say that the most of the cultural problems we face can be traced to the failure of men? It looks like it, but it's not. It's all over. It's the church, men and women within the church. Yeah, we're trying to blame it, but I don't really think so. I think it's everybody's. I think it's and in person, it's like again today, in the first part of Proverbs chapter 2, we're not listening. We learn the 10 Commandments. We learn all these commandments. And we put them aside, and then we don't pay attention to God. We got to take some responsibility and some accountability for ourselves. We do not need to be blaming each other. It's that person's fault too, for not taking accountability and being responsible, saying, I need to break this cycle. Some people get too comfortable in their ways, just like Nicodemus in John chapter 3. Actually, you got to go back to John chapter 2 when we see that he went to the temple. He went and sought Jesus. He went to listen to Jesus and then learned that Jesus was going to tear that temple down. It took over 40-some years to build. He's going to take it, tear it down, and rebuild it in 3 days. And Nicodemus was curious. Nicodemus went and thought, but until something like that happened, Nicodemus was comfortable with everything. He had all money, power, wealth, knowledgeable, everything. Just like that. Nicodemus was an example. He eventually took responsibility. He eventually broke that mold and went on. And we know that down towards chapter 19, that Nicodemus met with Joseph of Arimathea, and they were burying the body of Jesus. Outnumber the men in church? Well, of course. What is the ratio of men to women? I'd say probably about 5-1 in my church. What are some of the reasons for this, and what difference will it make? Well, a lot of it is probably because, like Junction, and we have a lot of older women, older people, period, and their spouses are gone, and so they're single widows and stuff, but it's like they still get together. We used to have the quilters until then, but till COVID hit. But COVID hit and it went. What will make a difference? I don't think anything will make a difference in this, except for we need to start attracting younger men, younger married couples into the church. We need, and this is where even our older women and older men can get involved. They got kids, they got grandkids, and this is where even when they come in, they can spread their wisdom. They can do like even in the parable of the talents. Everybody thinks the parable of talents is about giving money. Parable of talents is about stewardship. Parable of talents you can look at as being fruitful. You can look at it as being a discipling type story, because you take what you pass it on for them to do it. Or you could, the man, the servant that received 5 talents, and the one that received 3 talents. They took what they had, they were fruitful, and they multiplied. You could look at it as taking men and discipling them and multiplying, using that talent, their skills, whatever it takes to disciple. And that's what instead of being like the one that was given some and didn't do nothing with it. That's how we become like the church. We become like that one servant who got 1 talent and did nothing with it. We have talents. We just don't use them. We think, oh, well, they'll be okay. They're in the church. They can come. They can listen. All that. We don't get to know each other. It's not like how I grew up in the Primitive Methodist Church. Yeah, when I lived in Pennsylvania, I went to the first Primitive Methodist Church of Beaver Falls, which they've renamed because they kind of died a little bit. But there's a few in Texas, one in Florida. There's none in Kentucky. I mean, it's a small group, but they did break off from John Wesley because they didn't like John Wesley's ways, John Charles Wesley's ways. But they still keep pretty much to it, but they just, I don't remember the whole story. But if you ever want to look up Primitive Methodist, just go online. You can look up. You can get their discipline line. It's like their discipline is probably 1/10 of what ours is. I mean, it's so small. But yeah, that's how we've become like that as a church. We're not discipling like we're supposed to. All of us have known men who failed in their marriage, their careers, their relationship, and with kids. Even though they had no intention of failing, what do you think happened? Well, it just men who've never been to church, who didn't know Christ. We didn't reach out to them. We were never that shining example. We didn't reach out to them. We didn't get to know. And then the ones that been in church and it happened to, church is failure. Church did not disciple. I mean, we've had pastors within our church, within United Methodist Church, that I know of years ago, throughout the years I've been around, 30-some years since 1980. They shouldn't have, and no longer pastors. Some of them, they put on the act. They're this great thing since God created, but then it's like all of a sudden they're no longer pastors. They've cheated on their wives. They've become gay. They've done all kinds of things, and it just amazed me. It's like even. They're supposed to be the most spiritual type person and leader type person, but they have problems just like just like us regular men, us laity. And I feel that sometimes us laity and the members of church have not been there for our pastors, have not took them into considerations and what their family's gone through. And it's like, pastors are just as busy as everybody, especially student pastors. I have a heart for our student pastors, even like our pastor Keeley. I am trying my best to help him out as much as possible, but that man is the strongest man I have seen so far. And I'll tell you 1,000 times, I'm really impressed. How he does everything he does and goes to school is beyond a miracle. He's got just a brand new baby. He's got 2 other kids. He's taking care of them, his wife, and everything. He's going to school. He's just going out making visits in between. I admire him. He's got studying to do. He's one of those that can just do it. Chad Brandt was. Kyle Long was. Every pastor I've known that was going to school managed to do everything else but take time for themselves. And I think that's why some of them have gotten burned out. Some of them didn't take time. Because a lot of them, even these student pastors, got that motivation. They're actually doing right. They feel like they got to do everything and not rely on those of us that are seasoned lay leaders that's been doing this for a while, or lay speakers, and that's one thing I like about being a lay speaker and being part of the lay. Teach our pastors different things. We can help them out in doing their job. That's why I like being at the church I am when we got student pastors. I can at least try to help them if they let. And if they would just slow down, take a breath, and revitalize them. They need to take vacations and more Sundays off than what they do. I know everybody's like, well, they only need two Sundays here, 2 Sundays. Being a pastor is a hard job. I feel sorry for them. I really think they need a couple more Sundays, even if they don't go nowhere, and they sit in that pew with their family and let us lay. I may not be perfect at giving the message. I may not be the way the standard that they want, but I do as God directs. I do as God leads. God uses us in mysterious ways. Estimate the percentage of men in your church actually involved in discipleship. Well, I can answer that. We're not active. And I'm bad for this because I'm trying to, but I'm also, we don't have nobody younger. That's like I say, I'm probably, other than the pastor and his new brother, everybody else is older than us. And when Chad Brandt was here, we tried having what we created the wise men so we could learn from them, so they could mentor us, so they could tell us their life experiences, situations we face. And that kind of fizzled out, and I kind of missed that camaraderie that we had. I wish we did, but hopefully we can get that going one day. What are some of the opportunities for discipleship in your church that your church offers the men? Right now, none. Right now, I'm trying to work on it, and that's why I'm reading this book, and I'm hoping as I post this to our conference website, because some of the men in our church, that's on Facebook, I got them into the conference website, because I put them in. So this way, even though they don't come to this United Methodist Men, they're on the conference, and usually they'll look and see what's going on. What are some of the reasons that men are not involved outside the church? Because a lot of times, just like our church, we don't offer nothing. Just come to Sunday school, church. Because we have student pastors. We're not as active as we used to be. I heard that years ago we used to have 200 people, and we used to have double the pews. Even there was more pews up in the pulpit area, where the choir sits. It used to be filled, 200 some people. I was like a person in the world to see Junction C that filled, that big. Well, we're already to chapter 3, which I will do that next week. I'm going to try to read these through so that this way you guys have ideas. Like I say, Man in the Mirror, No Man Left Behind. Good course, good book. You can get it by going online to maninthemirror.org or No Man Left Behind, and you can get this book and read it. You can order the DVDs. You can, get the course book. You can go online and do it. Like I say, Foundations, right here, the workbook. And it comes with the DVDs, which comes in this nice little case. The books are in there with it for $99, and it's yours forever. And you can teach it to the men in your church. Here's your foundations for the first part, 8 series. And again, second series, methods and tactics, another 8. Best thing you can do. If you do it online, you pay the $99. It's $99 a year. And if you want to teach it from online, you can. My best thing is just order the thing. If you need the actual PDF book, 1968@gmail.com, and I'll send you the PDF books gladly. You'll be good to go. You can buy the whole kit, have the DVDs, and like I say, if you just need and you want this for your men to have, just send it to me. The email me. Be glad to send it. Anyway, folks, that's it. I'll see you again. Have a good day, and God bless.